Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to be a little different. And can I control the... Yeah? I'd like to say thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to be part of this conference, and to really congratulate Sandra on the vision that she's had for this event, because it's a critical piece of the puzzle for us to actually succeed as a region. We have to lift our awareness, we have to become engaged, we have to be part of the game if we want to succeed. So congratulations, Sandra, and your team on this. Mr. Mayor, Minister, distinguished guests, Madam Ambassador, everyone here this morning who is interested in the subject, I thought I would do something a little different. I thought I would use a metaphor to explain what we are all about. Because the game of shipping and logistics is a global game, it takes global people to act as global players. We cannot succeed unless we are going to operate at international standards. So the metaphor I thought I would use was the Olympics. And we as Caribbean people have produced Olympic stars. We have produced people who have been able to operate at global standards. You can't become a star like Usain Bolt just by raw talent. It takes a team of people, it takes an environment, it takes a significant forward thinking in order to produce the number of athletes that we are producing in the Caribbean who operate at world level. Now, all this metaphor is about is to explain that if we want to succeed in the logistics business, we have to be able not to, because Usain Bolt doesn't get a handicap when he goes in to run his race, because he's from the small island of Jamaica. He's expected to run the race at the same pace as everyone else. And that's what's going to be expected of us. Previous speakers have spoken, about what it takes in order from a policy perspective to understand, what is the landscape and what do we need to do in terms of policy in order to get there. You've seen MTI operations and how forward that is, even having robotics involved. Fritz talked about having to get the human resources ready for this opportunity, and talking about all the differences. And of course, we heard about where the financial opportunities might be through Miami as a hub. But we have to get ourselves into this game. Now, we talked about Panama and what Panama means. And we have obviously a very short window within which to begin to understand that opportunity and to take advantage of it. I am of the view that it's not simply Panama which is necessary for Panama to succeed. For Panama to really succeed, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Martinique, Guadeloupe to make this a success. Because we have to change the landscape within the entire Caribbean if we are going to take full advantage and make this a destination for not just logistics and shipping, but transshipment and everything else that goes along with it, the value added that goes along with it. We also, I was given an impossible task, asking me also to talk about Africa as an opportunity for us. And this is why I moved to a more metaphorical approach to this, because I did a first presentation which had lots of data showing what was happening in Africa, what was happening here in the Caribbean, and then I said it would be very boring, let me not do that. But I thought why Sandra asked me to talk about Africa, because Panama is the first wave of opportunity, but Africa is the second. And why so? Just some small facts. In the next 25 years, the working age population of Africa will be 1 billion people, which will be larger than China and India combined. And you've seen annual growth in Africa of over 5.4% in terms of their GDP over the last 10 years. And in the last couple of years, as we have seen commodities fall, those non-oil producing countries have dropped to 4.5 and oil producing countries to about 3.3. So Africa is growing rapidly. And between 2010 and 2015, 21 million formal wage-paying jobs were created in Africa. These are good, solid jobs. And over the last 15 years, 53 million jobs have been created. So what you have is a growing population of middle-class people who are now becoming urbanized. Fritz talked about urbanization. So 187 million are expected to come into the cities over the next 10 years and to spend $2 trillion by 2025. So now you're talking big spend, you're talking markets, you're talking new opportunities. And we have to understand what that means and how we use the platform of the Panama Canal to actually prepare ourselves for that new market which is coming. African economies are actually rapidly accelerating with their technology use. They're the ones who have invented M-Pesa, which is mobile money. In East Africa, you can pay any bill with your M-Pesa, with your telephone. And my organization that I used to head in Geneva, we in East Africa had 7,000 people employed there. And we were paying some of these rural women that we were employing through M-Pesa. So what this has done is all of a sudden increase the market considerably to rural people and to marginalized people who in the past were not really part of the marketplace. And it is this kind of technological revolution which is taking place in Africa, which is going to make it a very interesting market. So we think perhaps what we see on CNN of a place which is, backward, famine, all sorts of negative things happening, but there are also lots of very positive things happening in Africa. So what I'm talking about in terms of opportunity, first one being Panama, the second one being Africa. And I think West Africa in particular for us. So the changing landscape. we've talked about the game changing, and we have to be ready for what's going on. Now, since 2008, when we've had the global financial crisis, global trade, global GDP has been growing in the most anemic manner possible. And as you can see, the IMF is saying that we could hope for 3.6% GDP growth globally by 2017. 3% GDP growth is not going to actually cause any of us to get wealthy. It's not going to be able to allow us to do things which we had hoped we would be able to do, and the plans that we may have had for our children. So what are we going to do which is going to be different, which is going to allow us to take advantage of new opportunities where they may arise, and to add value to what it is that we could expect? Now, what has been alluded to by Fritz and others is that there is a big shift to Asia, and what that's going to do is it's going to shift the way that the global trade lanes actually work. And this is only up to 2020. But when we start to look at the dynamics of Africa, that those trade lanes are going to shift again. So we here in the Americas certainly are going to be looking at how we are going to benefit, because basically the markets used to be solely in the north. But now that the markets are moving to Asia, and eventually, and you can see the second number 2 is between Africa and Asia. But we need to see how we can connect Africa to the Americas. And all of us in this room of a slightly darker hue came here from Africa. And there was a big trade at that point. And now we need to reverse that trade and see how we in the Americas can partner with West Africa in particular, where we have both cultural and blood relatives, that in fact we need to make that bridge. And I think that Martinique and Guadeloupe and the French islands are very well placed, because already in Francophone Africa, you will see all the French companies that I see outside very well established in West Africa and in Central Africa. So there is already a connectivity through France and a relationship through France into Francophone Africa. We don't see that same sort of relationship in Anglophone Africa. We don't see the big Anglophone companies controlling the ports like you see in West Africa. We don't see the big Anglophone logistics companies in West Africa, but we sure see the French. So you already have a strategic advantage in that you have a footprint. It is how do we use that to our advantage to create that hub and that link. Already spoken about is the 1 year ago, only 1 year ago, we saw the handshake between Barack Obama and Raul Castro. Last week, the first cruise ship arrived. So we're seeing things moving very quickly, apace, and things are going to be changing. And whether it is that we're looking at the tourism supply chain, which we should know something about in this region, or we are talking about other kinds of activities, there is that link. And I think that Cuba, of course, is not going to make the game more difficult for us. I think they're going to accelerate economic activity in the region and we need to be there to benefit. Now, just last week also, the Cubans and the Dominican Republic were in discussion for a partial scope trade agreement. We cannot allow Dominican Republic and Cuba to have off in a small bilateral agreement without the rest of us being in that game. Unfortunately, we have been, I think, very xenophobic in our small islands, not even wanting to sign our proper agreements with the Dominican Republic because we're afraid of them, they're too big, and that they're going to swallow us. But ladies and gentlemen, Dominican Republic and Cuba are small in comparison to the rest of the world. If we are going to join a big game, we need all of us in that game to win this game. If the Caribbean is going to come back with any strength, and if it does not continue to be marginalized, which it is now, then we need to join forces with Cuba, Dominican Republic, and the smaller islands, and let us see how we can win this game. This is just one of the slides, of the many slides that I had on data and statistics related to how Africa performs as exports and the Caribbean group. And you can see that the EU and China are the big trading partners currently of Africa. And of course, United States and the European Union are the big trading partners for us in the Caribbean. So they're not looking our way. We need to look their way. We need to see how we engage, how we become more active in that part of the world. And I think that there are real opportunities for us here in that way. So how are we going to do this? There was a former politician in my country who said it takes cash to care. So there needs to be investment. And luckily for us, we actually have some substantial French investment in Jamaica, in our ports. And we are seeing that the vision for that investment is to move our 20-foot equivalent units from a capacity of 3 million to 5 million TEUs. And there is also an investment from Jamaican company looking to expand their capacity by 100% also. And there is down the road potential of a Chinese investment in more capacity as well. So it does take capacity for us to be part of this game. But there is also a need not only for the hard infrastructure and the things that we saw at MIT. There are also the small companies, logistics companies, and everyone else, freight forwarders, etc., that make this work. There is also the government and the rules and regulations that are necessary to make things work. So, in terms of the private sector, there are some critical needs. We have already heard about the fragmentation of information. We can't make good decisions unless we have good information. And I think there's an opportunity for this. Lack of understanding about foreign markets and who we're talking about. Next practices to ease penetration into emerging markets. So we're not talking about good practices, we're talking about next practices. Uncertainties in market situations, because people are very risk averse. I'm going to go into a new market. We've heard about some facilitation in Miami, facilitation in Puerto Rico, Panama. But we need some trusted partners. And I think this is where this conference can begin to build some partnerships, bringing people together, having us understand what it is that we can do. And we need support for end-to-end business if we're actually going to see this growth. It's not about the competition between my company and your company. It's about us coming together in a partnership to win a bigger game. And finally, trade and investment facilitation. This is what I've been spending my last 2 years on. Creating for Jamaica a trade information portal, establishing a single electronic window so that we can actually have a paperless system which is internationally recognized, import-export and export inspection centers to facilitate the movement of goods and to have things moving smoothly. And of course, on the other hand, we need to automate. This is the wrong slide. I had a little problem with my computer. It smashed yesterday, so I had a hard time with my slides. But basically, automate business regulation, electronic inspections. We have to get things at a new level than we have in the past. And people have to be ready to change. Many of us, and I have found this in the Jamaican context, think about the domestic economy and don't think about what it will take to be part of a global process. So only 10% of the goods passing through the ports of Jamaica actually are coming in for the domestic economy. But our people who are responsible for managing the customs have a mindset that they need to control everything. And that can't work in the context of trying to move things through in a facilitatory manner and in the fast kind of time frame that we saw at MIT. So there's a whole mindset change that needs to happen there. So partnerships, critical. And I think that the French Caribbean islands can join forces. And I'm happy that I'm part of a company that has been working in Martinique for almost 30 years. So I'm very familiar with the environment here. And so it's going to take partnerships for this to work. And I think if we do that, we can take the gold. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.